So, dann willkommen zu einem neuen Block&Wine. Darf euch bitten, alle Platz zu nehmen. Und heute haben wir eine Special Edition. Wir starten ein bisschen früher als sonst und auch mit dem Wein ist es heute etwas anders. Ihr wisst, normalerweise kann man hinten sich sofort den Wein nehmen, aber wir werden das heute im Rahmen des Innovation2Finance Events ein bisschen anders handhaben und stattdessen gibt es dann ein After Block&Wine im Loft oben ab 18:30 Uhr. Und wir starten jetzt auch direkt gleich mit unserem inhaltlichen Input, wo es um Crypto Custody in Modern Banking geht. Und da darf ich jetzt schon als erstes den Georg bitte zu mir auf die Bühne bitten, unseren Host und Organizer von Block&Wine.
Danke. Thank you, Sophia. Thanks, Sophia. And we should invite our two speakers today. Florian from NodeVentures, give him a big applause. And Suleiman, he's coming from Elevator Ventures, down with the elevator. So, thanks both that you're here. That's great. Okay, guys, have a seat.
Thank you.
So this Block&Wine is very special to various reasons. So we're obviously here. Not yet with wine because it's still early in the day, but still somewhere. But we will gonna have the innovation Afterhour at LOFT afterwards. So it's Sofitel Vienna. Come on close all a little bit, but you're sitting anyway. So we're gonna have pretty much colloquial talk about the big topic we had today. So innovation in finance. And just to sum up what we've heard today, we had the grand scheme of things when it comes to digitalization, innovation, when it comes to modern and financial business structures and processes. So starting with a Google talk in the beginning, then with a blockchain one-on-one, and then how marketing can work out in the digitalization space. So a broad arena we were focusing, and what we are now doing here together, it's my pleasure that you're both here. If I may so, Suleiman, to introduce you in that way, that you are representing traditional markets, capital markets, if you want it so. You are an investment manager at Elevator Ventures, and by that corporate name, I would just, and allow me to do so, I put you into the traditional chapter. But I do know that you're actually a crypto-minded guy, so your experience in that field is tremendous, and that's why we are very glad that you share that with us. And then it's my pleasure that from Linz is the startup coming, but Florian, you are from Vienna, right? You're representing NodeVentures. NodeVentures is, if we talk about applied modern or banking use cases in a startup, in a scale-up, in a business, then it is NodeVentures. You are a registered, crypto custodian. What is a crypto custodian and where can a crypto custodian be registered? Now a brief check-up whether you've listened to my talk in the morning. No, I'm joking. The point actually is that under the AMLD5, the European Union for the first time actually introduced something like registered crypto service provider, and that's actually what NodeVentures did. So for a startup, very good track record to get it done. And actually what is also very interesting about NodeVentures is we're not doing it by onboarding a load of consultants, lawyers, and so on. You did it on your own, and you're convinced by your technology, by your expertise, and by your knowledge, the Austrian FMA on your business and on your framework, and that is pretty much significant. So thanks both for being here, and Florian, I would like to give you firstly the floor for a brief keynote. So sum us up, what is crypto custody? What is NodeVentures doing, and how do you approach this if we are saying, okay, what is now innovation in modern banking?
Well, thank you, Georg. in a nutshell, would you have your money, your jewelry, all of your heritage lying around in your flat? Would you carry it with you in the street? I guess not. So basically what NodeVenture did over the last couple of years is build up some infrastructure services. And the core of it, as you already mentioned, is crypto custody. In order to provide crypto custody in Austria, you need to be registered with the Financial Markets Authority, FMA. So we did this. This registration process takes quite some time. But with the right people on board, as you already mentioned, we have our in-house lawyers, we have all of our development in-house. You can make it. So basically this is what we did. The core is from our two founders, one of who should be here today. Unfortunately, he's at another event. So I'm replacing him. And what they did, they operated one of the largest crypto mining farms, Ethereum mining farms in Europe. Back then they found out that actually in order for the tokenization to work out, you need to have a safe place where to put your tokens. This is what they did. I think it was in 2017, there was an article in the FT stating, don't go into creating your own fintech because it takes ages and you burn a lot of money. Nonetheless, this is what NodeVenture did. Here we are today, and we can offer not only safe custody for all of, for the most tokens that you could think of. We have a list of a prioritized list of the tokens that we would like to have under our management. Secondly, you need to have a user-friendly interface. And with this, I would say this is in a nutshell what a crypto custodian should do: provide safe custody and some user-friendly interface.
Okay, thanks. That is already a lot. So in a nutshell, we have two parameters now in the room: safety and user-friendliness. Suleiman, you maybe I can spoil it. You investigated that market pretty much. So what is your learning in that market anyway, and how do you approach, well, in general, to get it back to the broader perspective, innovation processes within your environment?
So, I mean, just to clarify very quickly, because we are, as a CVC, I mean, we are a corporate VC. So, I mean, as much as you would describe us as classical, and we might also be, because at the end of the day, we are the CVC of a bank. In front of that bank, or in the eyes of our colleagues at RBI, we are the, weird innovators as well. So we're the outliers, and this is how we are viewed, and in a good way. This is in a positive frame. That said, when it comes to custodianship, we have investigated this. Yes, you're correct, and we discussed this at length. We also discussed this with the team at NodeVentures at length. And it's no secret that we are very interested in the business model. Specifically, also, we're interested in what they have built, and what they have built does carry a heavy intellectual property and the true, let's say, value within the company, and that's key number one. So you say user-friendliness, and you say the usability and the utility of what is being developed. And that's absolutely, of course, the number one checkbox you would want. Is there utility? And what you started with, would you keep your jewelry, your cash, your possessions in your home, in your flat? No, the answer is obvious, although we'll hear some weird stories from time to time. No, but then again, anomalies, hopefully. You wouldn't, and that's actually what banks started with. And there is maybe a slight misconception that banks are just custodians, or that they started just as custodians. This was not the point of the system. It was the utility of custodianship. So after I maintain, or after you agree that I keep your possessions safe, what can we do? So there is always the next step. It's not just that, okay, they're safe, they're here, you can come and access them. No, it is more of, well, can you now use that to basically trade internationally? Can you use that to pledge it against a certain venture, whatever you want to do, et cetera, et cetera. So when it comes to utility, this is what we checked initially, and NodeVentures and some of the other custodians, they check that box. And let's also be very direct about the technology. You can develop the technology, more or less. You can have a lot of great ideas about how to build the robust one, but then again, what is the next one? So after you have allowed your client or whoever is using your platform or system, hardware, etc., to use it to safeguard their assets. Then what? What do we do now? And this is where the user interface comes to help. But then at the end of the day, this is where the ecosystem should be, now hopefully enabling the usage of, let's say, crypto assets or digital assets as a maybe larger category into our mainstream lives. I mean, so far, I don't know how many, let's say, true daily life applications we have seen. I mean, I leave that maybe to you to shed some light, but we haven't seen, to be honest. So as much as we're interested in custodianship, we also haven't seen yet the next step.
What would be the next step? I mean, let's reflect on that first, and then coming back to one big question, which I guess is also an edge of NodeVentures. It's tradability of assets which are on secure custody. Because at first hindsight, one might have the assumption that if something is secure in a vault, tradability is not given anymore. And maybe first back to you, Suleiman, and then to you, Florian. Suleiman, to you first. What is the next step, especially in the context of mass adoption, when it comes to also crypto custody as a subcategory of that? And how do you pass the bridge of safe custody on the one hand side and well, tradability on the other hand side? But Suleiman first.
What's the next step? It's something that we always deliberate. I mean, I see some of my colleagues, and we always discuss that. Some people view it as the next trade finance or logistics solution. So again, the kind of decentralized model allows for some impressive ways of releasing, let's say, letter of guarantees or letters of credit versus some form of goods or materials that arrived. You can send a lot of signals along the supply chain, theoretically, and this would create a flow of trade finance that is hopefully faster and even more secure and a bit more reliable than the mess that we already know more or less exists, actually. And that solution, I have been hearing about trade finance and logistics on the blockchain since 2016, quite intensively. Unfortunately, most of what we hear about till this moment is still in the POC stage, limited rollout, limited pilot, limited something of the sort. So maybe this, this is why we're saying it's a maybe, and we are VCs, we're always like, okay, maybe this, maybe that. But trade finance is something that we look at and we hope maybe someone will bring it to fruition.
Yeah. I do know there are a lot of block-and-winers who are very bullish about trade finance, so it's interesting that you focus on that. And again, I mean, I was just very bluntly reflecting on the Gartner cycle, and maybe that's the true story that, well, in the years of 2016 to, let's say, 2019, blockchain was the solution to everything, but possibly bringing a solution to a problem which didn't exist in the first place, but that's a different story.
Well, basically, the problem does actually exist. There's no doubt about that. But blockchain and crypto, sometimes it's a solution seeking for a problem. And let's not exaggerate. Let's rather take one step back. How many banks in Austria do you know where you can basically put your token into custody? Who offers that? And I think before we take the next step and how can we develop this and where do we go from there? I mean, it's BNY Mellon, the oldest bank in the United States, that now since September offers crypto custody. And crypto custody only, because for the bank this is a safe haven. They do what they've always been doing, they provide a vault. And if we look at what are the alternative solutions to things like NodeVenture, basically you can go into some software solutions, so the hot wallet, where basically you are prone to being hacked in every moment in time. The alternative is some offline storage. And we know that durability of consumer grade and also industrial grade USB drives, hard drives, etc. And then of course there's the human factor, which we also exclude. You can lose your USB drive, you can lose your hard drive, you can leave your drive somewhere in the sun, you can put them in the car. you can flush them down the toilet. I mean, there are ever so many options, and this is basically the human factor, and we know this also from AI, we know this from autonomous driving. The human factor is what is usually the impacting factor, and I think before we take an outlook into and what will we be able, what will we enable our consumers to do once they have safe custody, let's take a break. Let's give the banks the time to incorporate the solution, just like NodeVenture, and offer safe custody to to all of those banked, because we still have roughly 15% of the Austrian population which is unbanked, and I mean this is the next step. And so this is my take. Let's go step by step, and all the other things like trading and what we can do will follow suit.
Mm. Give us a short market oversight, or both of you. How many European banks are offering crypto custody?
I mean, personally, I'm aware of some POCs. Unfortunately, most of them are under NDA, even with some of the DDs that we've done. Yeah. But in Germany, in the UK, we know that there are many pilot programs, and that's a fact. Did any of them roll out? I actually don't know.
From what I know, and we do market research basically as a day-to-day job, there is no offering in Europe. I wouldn't know of any. And I mean serious offering. I mean offering some USB drive and then basically do it yourself, some DIY solution is not going to make it.
You're speaking now from the B2C market and not from the B2B market?
Well, both actually.
Both actually, okay.
Let me maybe just interrupt this and say, okay, but you know, all of what you said is definitely the right way to look at it. It's let's offer something first as infrastructure, but then I would here counter argue and say, why? Why offer it? Why would a bank come to you today and say, you know what, I like the solution, let's have custodianship as a part of our offering? Tell me.
Well, basically it's what you always promise. You offer that I can either put my jewelry, my cash into you, and the basic promise operating for a bank is trust. Consequently, it makes sense to say, okay, let's offer a new product to our consumers, A, and B, I mean, the banking infrastructure per se, with all the CBDCs and the other offerings out there, will require some crypto custody for their own use. So it makes sense to build up that infrastructure because they need it for their B2B operations anyway, with central banks, etc. And then if I know how to operate that, we can also offer this to our consumers, and we have the brand, we have the standing, we do have the reputation. And yes, that means that, of course, suppliers like us, we need to comply with all of their standards and have this dashboard and this reporting and this view and etc. But we can do that.
Then let me take one point. You basically likened crypto and digital assets to jewelry. So this is maybe where we always would have the question of what next, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of the cryptos, not all of them, but a lot of them are still projects fundamentally. They are evolving, they are not yet gaining fundamental value.
You're outing yourself now as a Bitcoin maximalist?
I'm not actually, at all. So Bitcoin also is facing its own challenges now when it comes to energy consumption at the very least, if we look at it, and then there are of course many other challenges. So what I'm trying to say is, you're trying to shift the paradigm of very classical, well-established institutions to view these digital assets as jewelry. And that's probably now where we start diverging a bit as, let's say, the representatives of, or the CVC of a corporate at least, and more the market that wants to adopt these digital assets, wants to take them on board, wants to try and work with them. Obviously, whenever a financial institution, so the pilots we just mentioned, all of them basically started with this idea that there is truly a certain level of wealth, however you want to quantify it, that shifted to digital assets. So obviously, like a knee-jerk reaction of any good, smart banker is, there is wealth, let's put it at least on our balance sheet. However it looks like, it belongs on our balance sheet, okay? So this is where we hear a lot on the instigation of custodianship projects, let's say. But putting and taking that project, let's say, POC project pilot, and taking it out and, let's say, a B2C offering to the full retail client base or to the market at large is the bigger question. It is the why. That's why I agree with you when you say, yeah, let's maybe talk about fundamentals first, and let's maybe discuss, okay, how can we bring the infrastructure, but also it's a way you have to converge somehow to the paradigm of the classical banker who says, listen, I want you on my balance sheet, but guess what? I don't want you to do anything crazy with that kind of wealth that eventually can do reputational damage, first and foremost. Additionally, it could bring regulatory fines.
This is actually what we can do. So you are the CVC of a huge Austrian bank with some international exposure as well. I do invite you cordially, go to your management accounting guys, ask them about the outflows to Bitpanda and the likes, and identify how much wealth already is gone to somebody else's balance sheet and is not in yours. And in turn, I mean, let's compare this with what happened with the ETFs. This is basically where the banks were laggards, roughly 8 to 10 years late. And if you want to lose this track again, I mean, good luck.
That's interesting, but I want to follow up on that, especially because that leads me back to the tradability question, right? The safe haven is clear. You are in the realm of the custodian, right? But at the moment, as you're transferring your asset elsewhere, you are at a weak spot. So now, to put it very simple, because you're open to attack vectors at various angles. How do you solve that? What do you do on that? What is the solution on that?
Directly ours?
Yeah.
That's an easy one. It's basically embedded in our processes, which are ISO standardized, which have a lot of test dates. We do some regular pen testing with the most reputable R&D institutes that we have in Europe. So basically we can, and we do have a patent, so basically what we can guarantee is any type of human error, be it on our side with support and technology and so on, is excluded, because whenever it's about dealing with tokens, there is no human interaction necessary. And on the other hand, any kind of error produced by the user is also excluded, because the user, at least with our interface, never, and I really mean never, has his private keys. Basically, I do not know to what an extent you are into crypto and having an account there. You have the public key, which basically you need to use like an IBAN. So if I have Georg's public keys, I can wire some tokens to him. And the private keys, on the other hand, is the password, so to speak, for Georg to release any funds to me in turn. Mm-hmm. Usually the private keys are core to how to operate safely. There are people who write this on papers and then put this into the actual vault at their banks. There are people who write it down. There are people who save it on their hard drives. There are people who simply lose it or try to memorize and then throw away the piece of paper, or somebody else in the same house did. Then those funds are not recoverable. And in our case, you basically have an interface just like with any other e-banking solution. If you need to reset your PIN, you need to validate who you are, and basically you will never be able to lose access to your coins.
Mm. Now, that's interesting. I mean, let's point it down to a very simple picture. I'm a young father. I have 2 sons at the age of 3 and the age of 2, and I'm super bullish on Bitcoin. And I allocate some funds on behalf of my sons in Bitcoin, and I do that because, well, that funds should be safe for at least 18 months, what they are then do 18 years or the next 18 years, and they should be safe until the time, right? So I put these funds on a custody solution from NodeVentures. Then as time flies by, while I'm not so bullish about Bitcoin anymore, I want to convert them to Ethereum. So how can I do that when Bitcoin is at NodeVentures custody solution?
Well, basically, at this moment of time, we do not offer any kind of trading. We do not any exchange services, because this is what we are not allowed to.
Okay.
Finanzmarktaufsicht, Financial Markets Authority does not allow for that. We do have a license for custodianship and custodianship alone.
Okay, so that would mean I would have been in a position to transfer these assets on a platform like Bitpanda, trade there and transfer them back to NodeVentures.
I will not comment on the supplier that you just mentioned, but you will need to find some third-party supplier.
Of course, you couldn't possibly comment. All right. Good. Gentlemen, and especially ladies, we want to keep that as much interactive as possible. So if you have questions, just raise your hands. I'll run to you and give you the microphone, and you just either comment on our heated discussion here, right? I will do so right away. Not only ask your questions, but also issue a counter statement if you want to.
Yeah, hi. Question to Florian. Is your offering blockchain agnostic, or are you only supporting a selected variation?
Well, we are currently offering the most relevant blockchains that are out there. We do, of course, have, as I mentioned, a prioritized list of what to incorporate in the near and also in the far-fetched future. But there are some zillions of tokens out there at the moment. So yes, we are working on this. For instance, what we offer is not only Bitcoin as the first and foremost, but also Ethereum, and anything that is based on ERC20 is also storable with us. Let's repeat this question. Let me answer this question in 6 months' time, and then I can also tell you where you need to go in order for that to work out.
That was an interesting point, because we were talking about also mass adoption. That was the point earlier today. And what struggles me from not only a person who wants to, well, get mass adoption in crypto, getting that started, but what I see in businesses being innovative, they're keeping the race of, well, let's say, innovation to onboard yet another chain, yet another cryptocurrency. Is that not a peril of innovative companies anyway, or is there a solution to that on the horizon? Do you see some solution in order to do that? So it's not Florian, Suleiman, do you see market participants who are fighting this peril to an extent where you would say, well, that sounds interesting?
I mean, if I understand your question and in a simple way, yes, of course. I mean, this will continue to be a pull and push from all sides until we somehow find the level where it's optimal, or it just is proven that, yeah, this doesn't work and let's just drop the whole idea. But I don't think, I mean, looking at the flow of ideas first and foremost, and then looking at the flow of money and investment into it, I think we will reach equilibrium, hopefully, within this next cycle. And hopefully, again, this comes with true market applications as well.
It's about standardization and usability. So we had usability already. Florian, one question for you. What are the key usability questions you had? So what was your typical persona you had in mind when focusing on usability on crypto custody in your solution?
Well, you built up some funds for your two sons. I ask you to reflect how easy was it to set up those wallets? How easy was it to get the funds that you basically wanted to have from fiat or general money into any kind of token, to buy it, to transfer it, to safely store it, etc. That was a hassle, I guess. It's not only a crypto thing. I mean, it's particularly striking in crypto. Because whatever there is out there, and I will not mention any other custodians because this is not the right atmosphere here, and I will not talk about any other third parties out there in the crypto sphere, but usability definitely is an issue. But we can take this, one step back as well. It's not only covered lately in the FT, but also Erste Group had a huge event on UX, UI and banking. Banks are well aware of their issues. In the 1970s and 80s, it was easy to basically get any kind of banking service from one day to another. And what is currently happening, in case you want to have some new offerings, some new account, some new, I don't know, it takes ages and it requires basically a lawyer and your tax consultant plus to really understand what does that mean for me. And usability and user-friendliness are core. I mean, it's on the one hand, it's design. On the other hand, it's intuitive design. It's understanding what does a user expect, and this is of course something users have gotten primed by over the last couple of years when banks, and it's not only the Austrian banks but also the other ones, set set up their banking interfaces. And of course, it's striking to see that even George is one of the most renowned offerings in Europe, or from Europe at least, and renowned and having been awarded with amounts of prizes, also is well aware of the fact that even George needs to evolve. So, yeah, work.
I mean, maybe that's a question a lot of us puzzles, and I mean, that's maybe one for you, Suleiman, because we had on Monday a talk, the arc of Bitcoin adoption, but not talking about Bitcoin unnecessarily, because not just reflecting on the statement that banks do know what are the issues. My question is, and that was also a question that was raised on Monday, was what do banks need, or decision makers in banks and financial institutions need, in order to adopt to that market? Let's say the digital asset, or being a little bit crypto agnostic, and of course crypto especially, and beyond that of course Bitcoin foremost. But in general, what is for decision makers in order to, you know, being aware of the issues, to transact with that business decision?
I mean, listen, I cannot maybe speak on behalf of a specific bank, let alone of course ours, but I can maybe take a leaf out of what we recently heard. So banks need a custodian, or they need the technology for custodianship. Many banks are building it in-house, or at the very least, when they mandate someone, a vendor, they try to absorb most of that with a lot of airtight agreements in-house. Why? Because custodianship is core. At the end of the day, no bank, and by regulation anyway, no bank would allow a third party to keep the assets on their balance sheet, or even to protect that. I mean, at the end of the day, the liability rests with the bank, so taking the custodianship is only logical. That said, they always would need also the understanding, or at the very least, the interface with the tokenization itself. So this is to become a bit more broader to talk about digital assets at large. So here, when you're talking about, let's say, precious metals or trade finance or any of these applications that we hear here and there, and we see that there are some good trials out to bring them to somehow tokenized in the digital economy, well, you need these engines to be also integratable within a banking environment. And again, a bank looks at risk for the most. Bankers are risk averse, banks are risk averse, and they are also heavily regulated. So you want them to come on board, you have to always address their fears, address their risks. Major risks, obviously, and the top one is reputation. I mean, at the end of the day, we always said that about challenger banks, and no names here. But if you win the lottery tomorrow, you get 600 million euros. Would you take that into any challenger bank, or wouldn't you just walk in, you know, Raiffeisen, and just Raiffeisen? Wouldn't you walk in any of the big banks and take your money and say, hey, you know, I have 600 million, what do I do with this much money? Now, the same applies to custodianship. Now, obviously, some people are making your choice of building a fund for their kids, some cryptos, some diversified assets, building a small portfolio, etc. Personal choices. But then again, where do you basically take that and say, okay, you know, this kind of asset, this kind of wealth preservation, can I do it for 18 years until they are old enough? Can I transfer it? Can I exchange it easily, safely, etc., etc.? If it grows, and this is what happened with many people, if actually suddenly Bitcoin becomes somehow very valuable and, you know, easily, let's say, easily a mainstream medium of exchange, let's put it this way, then what? Your children are suddenly not just millionaires, they are multimillionaires by any currency measure, maybe by Bitcoin measures. Then, you know, one Bitcoin maybe is the millionaire of the future. But then if you see that, and if you actually, everyone knows that you have this fund, then suddenly, if it's not with a bank, if it's not with a major custodian, you will probably be attacked, and that will be relieved from you.
No, it's interesting, because, I mean, maybe any challenge or statement from the audience or question on that, so happy to take it. Sophia?
I have a question, because if that happens and it gets like very broadly used, and then, you know, like a lot of more people want to get into it, and I guess that's also a question to you. How easily is your solution scalable then? Like, how easily can you scale what you offer currently?
If that's a question for me, that's an easy one. We have the appliance, we have the interfaces. We currently cater to banks alone. So basically, we have the market demand, and we meanwhile know how what the process looks like, and what the steps are in order for the banks to understand and also to cater to the needs of their consumers.
So it could be very fast.
Yeah.
So and then because also maybe related to the scalability, it's advertised an offline wallet with the flexibility of an online wallet. Like, how does the work from a technological point of view? Because in like, custody of assets with the means available, HSM, MPC, what's the technology?
Well, I could, in theory, send you the patent because that's public, so you can dig into that. But generally speaking, all of your funds are stored securely offline. There is a request for a transaction. We sign this offline as well, and then we broadcast it online again. That's in a nutshell what we do. So basically, your tokens are always on the offline side. And then we have a means of signing things online and then broadcasting it, and then after those 10 to 15 minutes, the general blockchain Bitcoin transaction takes. It's signed, it's official, and it's you can validate this on the blockchain.
Great. One more question from my side. That is actually also a little bit to both of us, both of you. It is when we talk about the adoption or integration of new businesses into legacy systems. The main point is, well, if you put blockchain in a very boxed and frank position, it's mere another database. So often the question is, where is the edge of a new system like a blockchain-based solution for any substitution for legacy systems? So my question is nowadays, when we talk about digital assets in general, but in crypto as a form of technical integration, there you have, of course, technical requirements you should meet, and you probably can address them with existing legacy systems. But apart from that, just thinking about DLT infrastructure as a whole, replacing existing settlement layers in banking infrastructure, not within a bank, but in intra-banking systems. Do you see in that area specifically an edge of the technology? And do you see, apart from the mere fact whether it is a matter of costs or whether of capital invested to operate that kind of systems, that there is a transformation now happening to the extent that technology is mature enough, cost efficiency is transparent enough? Do you see a tendency in that direction, and well, to custody in specific?
Short answer, unfortunately, no, we haven't seen it.
Okay.
That said, the slightly expanded answer on that, I used to be, in a previous fund, we had an investment called M10. And M10 was founded as a spin-off from an open banking company, actually. So, and that open banking company, it's called Token. It's founded by Steve Kirsch, Silicon Valley royalty. This guy had like 7 exits. He's one of the patent holders for the optical mouse. Big guy. He knows a lot of things, and he's already very rich. But he likes to build things continuously. So he built this M10. M10 was exactly what you described, like to start as intra-bank settlement layer, and then to take it especially from these big names where they have anyway multiple currencies, multiple geographies, like Standard Chartered, etc., and try to do also an additional layer of some interbank work. Now, that unfortunately faced, first and foremost, a huge cost base, massive cost base. Resources, hardware, deployment. Then additionally, it faced a massive risk problem and a regulatory hurdle, a huge one. I mean, balancing and reporting the liquidity of these transactions and these settlements to your regulator with the current regulatory frameworks as well. That was actually near impossible, and I don't know if any of those pilots took off. They had, if I recall, at the last count, that was more than a year ago, They had 22 pilots with one of like the top international banks you can ever think of. I don't think any of them took off till now. Maybe they will. Maybe again, when you have more technologies that enable that, something, you either bring the cost down, the risk down, or both, and something can take off. But so far, I haven't seen that materialize.
Florian, if you're talking to banks, how sensible is the budget and cost factor if you talk to banks offering you solutions?
Well, I think I can take maybe a broader spin here, also following suit from what you just said. Budget usually is not the huge issue. I mean, yes, banks have trained us as their consumer guinea pigs to accept that there are fees, of course. And on the other hand, if I see tech adoption, I just can highlight what you just said. Basically, it's a lot of pilots, it's a lot of POCs, it's a lot of talking, it's a lot of money and time invested, but results actually not so much. But what is one of the issues here? We all know that there is the famous risk-return trade-off, and this is where consumer banks are basically under the auspices of all of the governments out there. So there mustn't be any all too high risk in consumer business, and this is why banks are super reluctant to adopting to those regulatory requirements, because basically when you have to operate some consumer banking and you know that there is basically risk excluded, you know that there is also no potential gains in that game. So that having said, we all know that PSD and PSD2 had been introduced just lately, I mean lately, also some years ago meanwhile, but for instance, if we take the Austrian banks, their tech infrastructure, also advised by IBM, Accenture and all of the others out there, was not as ready as it should have been, which is why the Austrian banks required a prolongation, extension of the final deadline as of when PSD2 needed to be adopted. So basically, banks in Austria are particularly reluctant to pursuing something along those lines because they already didn't manage to adopt PSD2 on time.
Fascinating. Yeah, thank you for giving me the mic. May I ask, because we're talking about banks, may I ask, I'm not sure yet, actually, both of you, I don't know, about CBDCs and how it will impact the banking landscape. You were expecting that, right? Because CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, if the abbreviation is not known, and I'm just excited to hear your takes on it and how it will change the landscape, how it might stress out banks to do things, how it would maybe take away business from them. What are your thoughts, basically?
Let's, address that last part.
Let's open a bottle of wine to get the question answered.
So, listen, taking business out of banks, yeah. A lot of people thought that with the open banking regulation and PSD2 in general, that it was aimed at somehow cornering the banks or boxing them. It was the exact opposite. It actually guarantees their position forever, because technically now you have a regulation where the bank is always going to be the custodian of money. Now that's open banking. You come to blockchain, I do not ever think that there will be any regulator, in their right mind at least, coming out and saying, we don't need banks anymore, and we don't need these custodians and all of these big balance sheets, etc. And that's not talking about the political power of banks. That's something you can have a lot of conjecture about. But there is true value to the banking system that we currently live under. And again, we talk, take this value, and let's address your question about CBDCs. Like these central bank coins or digital assets, the whole concept here is what should they facilitate? So you ask yourself, what should a digital currency enable? I think you just brought this up a second ago. Is it speed? Is it faster? Can we now reconcile faster? Can we now somehow be more accurate with less errors, less whatever measure you want to have for that, if we use these currencies? Can we as well have more efficient or effective exchange rates, or prevent bidding and speculation against some currencies, especially in the developing world? So you hear a lot of these in the sandboxes of CBDCs. You hear a lot of concepts. Okay, we can talk about these faster layers of communication and even more secure ones to have an internal, and I think the Swiss have just published a couple of months ago the first trial of reconciling I think the interbank settlement through the digital Swiss franc, which apparently they moved a few millions and it was a great success and they had a press release and it was all nice, but eventually, you see, this attitude to CBDCs, I mean, you should expect that about any regulator. If banks are slow, do you think central banks are faster? So, you know, at the end of the day, it is really startups who will bring a lot of the push. Market adoption will bring another level of pressure, balance sheets decreasing and suddenly evaporating. So a banker looking at, okay, if the money is not in our bank and it's not at my competitors, where is it? So where is it? Well, some of it went to crypto and to digital assets. So they want some of that back, but still, they do not want to take the risk. So mitigate the risk, lower the risk to a level that's acceptable by a bank and by a regulator. And then CBDCs maybe could be this way of saying, well, anyway, there are no risks now because guess what? This is issued by the central bank itself. Practicality says, as you know, you were just citing PSD2. Come on, I mean, PSD2 was, I think, drafted in 2012 to be implemented in 2016 and to be extended 10 times until my children are up and, you know, working hopefully as investors and still investing in open banking startups that want to do PSD2. So it's slow and you cannot count on the regulator to bring the innovation. Yeah, that's why, you know, I mean, actually, if you read the paper by one of our companies providing actually the financial crime risk basically modeling for that, or a part of the pilot, because they have selected, I think, 50 banks, 100 custodians, and 30 other technology providers to try and experiment, to form groups and experiment. This is reactionary at best. You know, you can read that because it is happening after several years of digital assets or cryptos and, you know, market frenzy and whatnot. So there is a bit of a reaction or a reactive component to all of this. Could it, you know, bear fruit? Yeah, it could. But then again, after it bears fruit. So we, you know, let's say all of these projects are successful. Then what? Is there a plan to roll them out? Did you ever hear? I mean, I'm not sure if anyone is aware of a CBDC plan to roll out in a certain date, even if it's 2030. No one.
There is none. We are in touch with Mr. Panetta's department regularly, and currently they are somehow designing, prototyping, testing. And by the way, who is the e-commerce partner the ECB set out for? It's Amazon. So hey, I mean, how sensible is that? Let me not comment on that.
Yeah, here we are. We are, and particularly me, here to break a barrel for central banks. But just as a matter of fact, and I think one might stress that, and on a more frequent basis, it was the ECB at the end of the day drafting the first comprehensive outline on a DLT infrastructure back then in the days where nobody was actually quite looking intensively into it, and was the ECB at the time, back at the time. So, but only on that, but not bragging.
Yeah, writing papers as usually does the Commission, yeah.
Exactly.
But that's the, I mean, if the Commission was a startup, the USP is regulation. Like this is what is so unique about the regular, and that's not in a bad way. AI ethical frameworks, this was born in Europe and adopted in Europe. Data, etc., etc. So, yes, it is advancement enough to write a comprehensive framework, but bring it to market, that's a challenge.
And this is also basically where even Janet Yellen and the CEO of JP Morgan are along the same line. They both emphasize that CBDCs can and will work, but they need massive regulatory frameworks, and this is what they are currently elaborating on.
Yeah, these were already very good roundup from both of you. Just want to ask any more questions, statements? Yeah.
Thank you for questions about CBDC. So my question is, on one hand, we have CBDC, and thank you for your answer. And on another hand, we have anonymous cryptocurrencies. And if you, I would like to listen to what your thoughts about anonymous cryptocurrencies in the future, and how they, or if they will be regulated somehow, etc.? Thanks.
Would you like to?
No, please start. Go ahead.
I mean, anonymous cryptocurrencies only to that an extent. There is token tracing, there is anti-money laundering efforts, there's all of set of rules that we need to comply with. Actually, when you do your homework properly as a bank, also as a citizen, there is no anonymous bank tokens. So basically, you will always know where your tokens come from, so basically, the anonymity question for me doesn't play any role in my life as a custodian.
I'll just take you back to also what we just said about risk. Banks do not want anonymity basically in any form and shape because it brings the risk. And maybe we failed to all say when we're discussing the utility of cryptos, the biggest utility have been since the day crypto started was actually black money and drugs, and actually it was mostly done for money laundering and for drug exchange.
At the beginning.
At the beginning, and let's, again, this is, no one can quantify technically how much of that is still out there. And maybe some can.
I will send you some report.
Please do. The idea is here, this is where reputational risk comes in place. No bank will ever want to touch black money willingly. So, and if they can avoid it altogether, they would, and that's actually what they try to do all the time. So,
maybe I can just
want to.
Please.
Did you later?
Biggest risk banks have these days, and they were actually taking away the licenses to some extent and paid huge penalty because they did the money laundering themselves. So I agree with you, this was the early Silk Road and so on, but I think we are very, chain analysis is one of them. They repeatedly say you can do the analysis, also it's called pseudonymity, not anonymity, which is the tracing and so on. So it's very difficult for a thief, unless he's maybe in North Korea somewhere, to actually extract the money via centralization. So this whole thing, putting the whole crypto world in the black market and in the gray market and so on, I think is wrong. Although I believe, we need to look at, and this was the question on regulations, on whether regulations are going in direction of, KYC and so on is important. At some point in time, it will come because you want to know that you deal with real persons and not some bots and so on. And therefore, I think the big topic is privacy. How will privacy be solved? And we are, I think, still in the early days. I mean, the chains don't have real answers. I mean, there are structures, but they are far from being adopted. But that was just a...
No, absolutely. Do you have another one?
Briefly comment on what you just said. Totally fine. At the beginning, in the early days of cryptocurrencies, of course, there was a huge illegal activities, financing, yada yada yada. But these days, I mean, it's a single-digit percentage of illegal transactions taking place and being financed via any kind of cryptocurrency. And because you say banks usually refuse to taking on risk. That's not generally true, but in this case it is true. They have to avoid the reputational risk regarding money laundering and so on. They do not want to have risk in their consumer business, but generally speaking, I mean, again, risk-return trade-off. Banks are hugely prone to being in the risky business because this is where the money comes in.
Just wanted to add two things, just comments, basically. At the beginning when the internet started, and you might know, because you were there, I was there, the internet was evil because you could find information online how to build bombs, right? So they wanted to ban it, and it was evil, right? Everyone was anonymous back in the day when you had social networks. They were all nicknames, they were posting bad stuff. It all changed, internet is still here, it's not banned, we're fine. Yeah? Maybe we get there sometime to ban it, but it's not happening now. And the other thing is about anonymity in the crypto space. I found it super exciting because I talked to somebody, I don't remember the name. Just imagine it's someone from a crypto startup, I don't know. And there is regulation in the EU that you have to preserve privacy. even if you have CBDCs or whatever have you have to have some kind of privacy, because otherwise you're violating the constitution of the, okay. And then we were talking suddenly about the EU launching their own Tornado Cash, okay, programmed by the EU, that allows you to put certain amount of money, maybe $1,000 or euro, sorry, or 5,000, whatever the limit is, and you can take it out again, and that gives you anonymity, because they're also working on their own blockchain, allegedly, right? You know all this stuff. And I found that super fascinating that they're blocking Tornado Cash. It's evil, but then they're creating their own version because they have to in order to bring privacy into the digital euro in the future. Just a comment, not a question, yeah? I found that fascinating.
We could elaborate on that point even further, but one what I want to bring to all of your attention maybe is that what we are discussing about the anonymity in digital currencies or cryptocurrencies or digital assets as a whole is anyway also the same or more or less the same political question we have with cash anyway, right? So whether there is a prohibition of or limitation of the use of cash, which of course is the most anonymous form of using payments in general. And now we have the same question, of course, on the digital realm, but I guess with the same answers. But that was always too much. Digi, your question.
So my question is related to custody of assets, and it is about if there is a conflict between the person or a firm who has given their assets to you as a custodian, there is a conflict between that entity and the state, or from which country that person is and the country where you are registered. Usually what we have seen in banks is that even if it's not fault of that person, because there is a conflict between two states, everything is confiscated or blocked. How would that work out when somebody has given you custody of their assets?
Well, I do invite you to have a glance at what has happened with erroneous transactions in the last couple of years. It hugely depends on the legislations involved. So there is no general rule of thumb. There were transfers of money in crypto that basically were not recovered. There are others where legislation forced, for instance, Crypto.com lately to also follow suit because they had an erroneous transaction to some couple, and instead of refunding $100 they refunded $10 million, and then this couple thought that they had won in the lottery, and actually they needed to pay it back to Crypto.com. So basically, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer that there is. It hugely depends on who are the players involved. Is it consumers? Is it banks? Is it banks with banks? Is it which is legislation concerned? And those things are by far not as regulated as they could be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like that we come to a roundup now. If there are no further questions, I'm happy to take any further question now on that front. But maybe one last question from my side to you, which is, I guess, the topic of today, but still also the topic of all of us being entrepreneurs or being active within the digital asset space. When do we gonna reach the 1 billion mark in digital assets users worldwide? What would be your estimate?
Listen, anyone's estimate is probably better than mine at the moment.
Take a wild one.
I will just refer you maybe to Sequoia Capital's latest a lot of press release and public presence on what do they think could happen. And I think everyone is speculating that within the next 5 years, roughly, we should see flows, so up to 1 billion, up to 10 billion, that's no one knows, but through mainstream flows in 1 or 2 at least powerful use cases. And once you have that, the infrastructure kicks in, and then it no longer is a solution without a problem, maybe.
Okay, numbers Suleiman 2028. Okay, Florian.
I will stick with Yogi Berra. Predictions are particularly hard when they concern the future.
All right. Thank you, guys. A big applause to both of you. Thank you so much. Now, we are Block&Wine, and today is a special event. We have now the Innovation Afterhour, so we're gonna go up to the rooftop of Sofitel Vienna, which is called the LOFT. We're going to see the sunset, I guess, from up there. We had the sunset now during the talk, so now we're going to have the sunset at the upper deck. Thanks all for coming. We are having a holiday break next week and again a holiday week the week after, so 2 weeks pause. And then we are again with our regular Block and Wines on Wednesday. Thanks all for coming. Join our channels, and now let's have some wine up there at LOFT. Thanks all.